It's 8:07, 7 minutes right now past the hour of 8 o'clock, and good morning. Welcome to Common Sense Matters. How are you this morning?
I'm good, Al. A little bit of rain and more rain coming. It's really a lot of flooding down here.
Yep, absolutely.
I was amazed. I live up in Swanee, and everything falls off the mountain, so.
Well, you had to worry about some landslides and stuff up there.
I hope not. But welcome to Common Sense Matters, a radio program sponsored by the Franklin County Democratic Party to discuss issues of the day. My name is Sandy Rice, and our topic today is gun safety and common sense legislation. Al tells me that he's been talking about the Emerge program, which prepares Democratic women for office, but we are doing that later in June, so tune in for that. Today our guest is Beth Roslyn Roth. She's the Policy Director for the Safe Tennessee Project, and she's calling in from Nashville this morning. First, though, let me make a few brief announcements to save a few dates, and at the end of the program I will repeat them with a few more details. We're just waiting for Beth to give her a few minutes to call in. March 9th at 9 a.m. in Manchester at the Coffee County Government Building, members of the 7 counties in the party's 16th Senate District are invited to meet with our state party chairman, Mary Mancini, to discuss plans for the upcoming year. March 29th is the Franklin County Democratic Party reorganization meeting, beginning with a potluck at 5:30 p.m. and business meeting at 6 p.m. at the Franklin County Annex in Winchester. April 6th is the Gently Used Treasure Sale held by the Franklin County Democratic Women. It will be on Saturday, April 6th from 8 to 2 p.m., again at the Franklin County Annex in Winchester. You may drop off items for the sale on April 5th from 2 to 8 p.m. We're calling, this is like a rummage sale, but we decided to call it the Gently Used Treasure Sale. It just sounds better, and hopefully we'll have some nice things for people to buy. We're waiting for Beth to call in. Okay. I just pushed this.
Yep, push that button.
Beth?
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Is it raining in Nashville?
Not yet.
Okay,
but I'm watching my creek near my house. It's going to flood again. It would be about the third time it's flooded so far this year.
Yeah, I think it's coming this way, coming your way. We're done with it here.
Great.
Well, this is Beth.
We had a few nice days.
Yes, we did. This is Beth Jocelyn Roth, and she's the Policy Director for the Safe Tennessee Project, a nonprofit organization to promote gun safety and common sense legislation in Tennessee. Beth, you started this organization after the Sandy Hook shooting, in which 21 first graders and 6 educators were killed just before Christmas in December 2012, correct? 6 years ago? We were all deeply affected by this, but what made you start your own organization?
Well, following Sandy Hook, when Sandy Hook happened, my kids were both little. My daughter was 7, the same age as many of the kids whose lives were taken that day, and my son was a 4th grader, and they attended a school that was very much like Sandy Hook, a small little neighborhood community school, and that shooting just it gutted me, and I was really just devastated by it. And then 10 days after the shooting, it was Christmas Eve, and I was setting up Santa Claus for my kids, and I noticed underneath the Cookies for Santa plate there was a note that my daughter had written to Santa asking that he take some of her toys to heaven to give them to the boys and girls from Sandy Hook. And she said that she wished the gunman had thought how sad the mommies and daddies would be seeing presents under the tree that no one would ever open. And that was really just a devastating moment for me. And I sat on my floor and I cried, and I thought, what kind of country am I raising my children in? And what kind of parent would I be if I see that this is something that troubles my kids and that scares them, and what example would I be setting if I didn't do something about it? So I spent about a year working with a large national organization, learned a lot from them, but ultimately decided that I wanted to focus just here in Tennessee, and really my organization views gun violence as an issue of public health. We framed the issue through the public health lens, and Safe Tennessee Project was sort of the result of all of that. So we got started in 2015 and have been plugging away ever since.
Wow. So you've made fighting to make our state and country safer for our kids your life's work. I've seen you in action, and you are awesome.
Well, thank you. You just do what you feel like you can do.
That's right. In a letter to donors in December, you listed some of the things you've been keeping yourself busy with: educating yourself on federal and state firearm law, studying Supreme Court cases, reading hundreds of published research studies on gun violence prevention, written press releases, done interviews, testified before committees and presented at state and national conferences and before police chiefs, met with members of Congress, built a website and database, taught young people how to track legislation and make their voices heard, worked with policymakers to determine the best evidence-based legislation and programs to discuss, pass and implement across the country. And this is without paid staff, consultants, or lobbyists. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yep. So, Beth, how are we doing to keep Tennesseans safe from gun violence? Do you have any statistics for us on gun deaths?
Well, I do. Unfortunately, they're depressing. We are now 11th in the nation for firearm mortality. We are 7th in the nation for gun homicides, and unfortunately we see those numbers rising every year. We are now considered the 3rd most dangerous state, according to violent crime data from the FBI's Uniform Crime Report. We are 5th in the nation for women murdered by men, most often with a firearm and almost always by a man they know, and every year we have well over 600 Tennesseans take their life with a firearm.
Wow.
And that number also is on the rise. And unfortunately, sadly, the fastest growing number of people using guns to take their lives are young people, ages 10 to 19.
Wow.
And then in 2017, Tennessee led the entire country in the number of children who picked up a loaded, unsecured firearm and shot themselves or someone else with it. So the numbers are not good. What we see, unfortunately, is that every year for the last decade, we as a state have been systematically loosening our gun laws, making it easier for more people to carry guns more places. And unfortunately, the result of that has been increases in gun deaths across the board, which is upsetting. And it's frustrating as a researcher who studies this, because what we see on the flip side of that is that states that actually do pass better gun laws, that make it harder for criminals to get their hands on guns, that make it harder for domestic abusers to regain possession of their firearms, that make it that create a penalty for adults who leave loaded guns laying around, and kids pick them up and hurt themselves with them. When we see states that actually pass laws that address that, their gun death numbers go down. So we see what needs to be done, what has worked in other states, and yet we are constantly dealing with the legislature that's going in the other direction. And it's frustrating, because all of these numbers that I'm sharing with you, every one of them represents a life, a family who has lost a loved one. And when you know that there are things that can be done to mitigate those numbers, to reduce them, and we're not doing them, it's incredibly frustrating.
So are Tennesseans, are citizens concerned about these statistics?
I think some are. I mean, part of what our mission is as the Safe Tennessee Project is to educate and raise awareness about the issue. My feeling is that the vast majority of Tennesseans probably have no idea that we are a state that is constantly in the top 10, top 15 states for these really dismal categories, such as firearm mortality and women murdered by men with guns and children picking up guns and shooting themselves. I don't think that most people understand how serious the issue is in our state. So we are always trying to raise awareness about that, the scope of the problem, understand just how extensive it is. There are people in our state who do care about this issue for sure. We have nearly 1,000 members across the state. There are certainly other larger national organizations that have chapters in the state that have a lot of members, and those of us who are aware of the issue are certainly doing what we can to try and educate our lawmakers, our policymakers about these issues and what can be done. But I think a lot of people really are unaware of just how serious the problem is. So we're trying to educate them, and I feel like once people get an idea really of what we're dealing with, then they would feel inclined to get more involved and to let their legislators know that they need to vote for good legislation and against bad legislation, or else the voters will select someone else to vote for.
Well, as it stands now, how could I get a gun?
Well, in the state of Tennessee, it's very easy for you to get a gun. There are many ways that you can obtain one legally. One legal way that you can obtain a gun is to go to a gun store, or anyone who is in possession of a federal firearms license, or FFL. So that could be anybody from, Academy Sports, or your local gun shop, or a licensed vendor at a gun show. You can go to them. You can select the gun that you want to buy. They will conduct a background check on you, and if you pass the background check, then you would be able to purchase the gun. That's a legal way of obtaining a gun. Also in Tennessee, you can legally obtain a gun by going to a gun show and finding someone at the gun show who is not a licensed dealer, who just happens to be walking around inside the gun show or perhaps in the parking lot, who's looking to sell a gun. They can sell you a gun without conducting a background check. So you can give them cash, and they will give you the gun, and there will be no record of it and no way to verify whether or not you're legally allowed to possess a gun. That's a legal way you can obtain a gun. You can also go online. There are websites that operate essentially like Craigslist. You go and search through a type of gun that you're looking to buy. You find one that you like. You email the seller, negotiate a price, and then establish a place to meet. You meet them in say a Walmart parking lot, or a parking lot of a grocery store. You give them cash, and they give you the gun. And there's no way of, checking to see if you're legally allowed to possess a gun or not. That's also a legal way to obtain a gun.
That is legal. That is legal.
Totally legal.
In Tennessee. Okay, so there's many ways I could get a gun without a background check, any training, not have a permit. Is that correct?
That's correct. In the state of Tennessee, you are not allowed to have a permit in order to purchase a gun, and as we just discussed, you are not even legally required to undergo a background check before purchasing a gun if you're purchasing the gun from a private seller.
Now, where could I take my gun? Would I ever be limited in taking?
Well, if you have a gun permit in the state of Tennessee, anyone with a gun permit is basically allowed to carry guns anywhere that they are not prohibited. In Tennessee, that includes bars, restaurants, public transportation, parks, including parks that in cities like Nashville or Memphis, a lot of parks are adjacent by schools. You can carry your gun there. You can carry your gun on a playground. You can carry your gun in legislative offices in Nashville. Basically, you can carry a gun pretty much anywhere that does not have a sign at the entrance prohibiting guns. If you are a full-time employee or faculty member at a public university, you are allowed to carry your gun there as well.
And if I don't have a permit, I can take it anywhere all the time?
Well, if you have a permit, you can take it any of those places.
Okay.
As it stands right now, you do have to have a permit in order to carry a gun legally in public. Although you are allowed to transport a gun and store a gun in your vehicle, even if you do not have a permit, that is due to a law that was passed in 2013 that was dubbed Guns in Trunks. Unfortunately, since the Guns in Trunks law was passed in 2013, we have seen a dramatic, really a startling increase in the number of guns that are being stolen out of vehicles. In Memphis, for example, since 2013, there has been a 256% increase in the number of guns being stolen out of vehicles. In that same time period, gun violence in Memphis has reached record levels. They have broken gun homicide records during that time period. The story came out in the Tennessean a couple of weeks ago that talked about gun thefts across the state and reported that in the last 2 years there's been an 85% increase in guns stolen out of cars statewide. This is an issue that is of real concern to law enforcement. The police director in Memphis constantly is in the news calling for legislators to address this issue, and he puts the blame largely for these increases in gun thefts on the legislature for passing that law. It's very frustrating because as someone who studies the issue, one of the things that you are always thinking about is, how are people getting these guns? You see these increases in gun violence, and you think, how are these people getting these guns? And especially with the youth violence, where are these young people obtaining weapons? And what we know is that most of these guns are being stolen, and most of them are being stolen from cars. A lot of the guns that are stolen from cars are, they're loaded guns that are left visible. They're left in the passenger seat or just, over in that little pocket, where a door is on the driver's or passenger side. And oftentimes the guns are the cars are unlocked.
Or the keys are even in. The keys are even in the car.
A door opens, they look in there, and there's a loaded gun, and they steal it. The gun owner is not held responsible in any way if they leave a loaded gun in an unlocked car and it's stolen. They are not, in the state of Tennessee, you are not even legally required to report a lost or stolen gun. So the numbers that we have in terms of stolen guns are likely an undercount. So that's frustrating, and that's unfortunately what we see sometimes are these unintended consequences of the gun laws that the legislature passes.
Well, I know that the Kyler Yorlitz shooting, Nashville singer, has been in the news, so the Tennessean has covered that with, the numbers of people that leave the car unlocked or with a car with the keys in it, and I like my car so that nobody steals my grocery bag. So that's just kind of unbelievable.
And again, what's frustrating is, my organization, we are not against the Second Amendment. We do not oppose a person's right to purchase a gun as long as they undergo a background check, and we don't oppose a person wanting to have a gun for self-defense. If you are going to have a gun and you're willing to undergo a background check and you understand the importance of storing your gun safely and securely, be it in your home or in your vehicle, that's fine. And it's important to note that the vast majority of gun owners across the country, and certainly in Tennessee, the vast majority of them are responsible, and they do understand this, and they would never in a million years leave a loaded gun visible in their car. If they were going to have a gun in their car, they would lock it up. It would be unloaded. They would keep it in a glove box or a console that was locked or in a trunk, and they would make sure that their vehicle was locked. You know, they would never leave a loaded gun laying around in their home where a child can pick it up. I mean, most gun owners understand basic responsibility, and they take it seriously. Our issue is the fact that there are, unfortunately, irresponsible gun owners out there, and their irresponsible acts and their negligence puts all of us at greater risk. And, you know, the types of legislation that we support and the policies that we would like to see implemented would have, you know, very little, if any, impact on, you know, legal, lawful, responsible gun owners. But we have to create more accountability. Because, unfortunately, you know, we don't live in a perfect world where everyone acts responsibly, and we have to have deterrence and consequences for those who don't act responsibly.
What are some pieces of legislation that are pending or working their way through the state legislature during this session? I know there's been some hearings even this week, and these bills are in committee.
Yes, so right now everything is so far, all the firearm legislation is still in committee. So in the House it will be heard before a subcommittee and then be passed on to a full committee, and then if it passes the full committee, it will end up on the House floor and be voted on by the full House. At the same time, you know, the companion bill has to make its way through the Senate. There aren't subcommittees in the Senate, so it would just be heard in front of, you know, one committee. Most of the gun bills will be heard before Senate Judiciary. If it passes Senate Judiciary, then it would go on to the full Senate floor. So right now, everything is still in the committee process. This past week, unfortunately, there is a move to make some really significant changes to our current gun permitting system right now. To obtain a gun permit in Tennessee, you take an 8-hour Department of Safety certified class that includes 4 hours classroom time where you learn basic gun safety, federal and state firearm laws, what your responsibilities are as a gun owner, and then you spend 4 hours on a range under the supervision of a well-trained and certified range instructor, where you practice basic shooting proficiency and accuracy training, and that takes about 8 hours. You pay $100 and you get a gun permit. This legislation that is working its way through right now would create a separate permit that they would call a concealed carry permit, which would dramatically reduce the amount of training that would be required to obtain a permit. You can choose from several options, including simply taking an online class that prints out a certificate of completion, and you would be able to take that certificate of completion and obtain a concealed carry permit for a reduced price. They haven't indicated what that reduced price would be. Once you have that permit, you would be able to carry a gun everywhere that you can carry a gun now with a regular permit, the only exception being on a college campus. So essentially, our real concern with that piece of legislation is, you could legally, someone could carry a gun concealed in their purse or in their pants or in a jacket pocket, and they may have never even fired a gun. They may have never loaded a gun. They may really know very little about how the gun operates, but now legally they could carry that gun, in a bar or on a playground or wherever. So we're really concerned about that piece of legislation. There's another piece of legislation that we're following that would basically reduce the punishment for someone without a permit carrying a gun in public. So we feel that is essentially encouraging people to carry their guns illegally if there's not going to be much of a punishment. There's not really a deterrent, so people will be more likely to carry guns illegally. We're really concerned about those two pieces of legislation. On the other side, there are actually some good pieces of legislation that we're following. One has to do with firearm dispossession, which means specifically in the case of like a domestic violence case, if an offender is found guilty of a domestic violence offense, the judge would tell the offender that they have to dispossess or get rid of any firearms that they have. That's the law. Right now, they have three options in Tennessee. If you have to dispossess, you can surrender your firearms to law enforcement. You can sell them to a licensed dealer, like a pawn shop or someone with a federal firearms license, or you can just give them to a third party. Tennessee is one of 13 states that allows third-party dispossession. However, our laws around dispossession are extremely loose. If you choose to dispossess your firearms to a third party, you are not required to provide the name of the person that you're dispossessing to. There's no verification that that person's legally allowed to have firearms, or it's themselves someone who's even allowed to possess them. So we have a bill that would require anyone taking possession of an offender's firearms, a third party, would be required to submit an affidavit affirming that they are legally allowed to possess firearms and that they understand the responsibility that they're undertaking. We feel that that is a step in the right direction when it comes to doing more to protect women in our state, domestic violence victims. We also have a law that is called Michaela's Law, a bill called Michaela's Law that has to do with child access prevention. It would hold adult gun owners responsible if they leave a loaded weapon around and a child under 13 picks that weapon up, that gun up, and shoots and injures or kills themselves or someone else. We have a red flag law that is being considered this legislative session that would allow an immediate family member or a member of law enforcement who believes a person is an imminent risk to themselves or others. That family member or member of law enforcement would be able to go before a judge and make a petition to temporarily remove firearms from the person that they feel is a threat to themselves or others. That is legislation that we have been working on for a number of years, and that is getting a lot of national attention. A lot of states are considering red flag laws after Parkland. And then we also have a bill that would expand background checks to all gun sales, not just the ones now between licensed dealers and sellers, but would extend that to cover private sales as well. We bring all of this legislation because, for one, we feel that it will reduce gun violence in our state. It will reduce the number of injuries and deaths related to firearms. It will keep specifically women and children safer. But we also bring this legislation because it's what the people of Tennessee want. What we've seen in recent polling data is that now a majority of Tennesseans support stronger gun laws. Between 2016 and 2018, we saw a 25 percentage point increase in the number of Tennesseans who support stronger gun laws. So, that is where the state is headed. That's where America is headed. The majority of Americans would like to see stronger gun laws. So, we're listening to what people are telling us that they want to see. We're looking at the evidence-based research that indicates which policies can be most effective, and then we're bringing all of that to legislators and asking them to help us try and get these laws through the system.
How can we keep up with these bills, and who do we call? These bills are in committee,
sorry, go ahead.
So these bills are in committee. So calling, our legislators doesn't help in these kind of early stages.
That's correct. So if you follow the Safe Tennessee Project, on Facebook or on Twitter, or if you just sign up to receive our emails, which you can do by going to our website at safetennesseeproject.org. That's all spelled out. We send out weekly bill alerts via email, and then we also cover all of them through social media. So we list each bill that will be up for committee votes in a given week, and we include contact information for those committee members, their phone numbers and their emails, so that you can contact those committee members, even if they are not your particular representative. If they are on a committee, it is still important as a Tennessean for you to call and let them know how you feel about a particular piece of legislation that they're going to be voting on. So that's a way that you can contact those committee members. And then we also usually each week there will be one piece of legislation, sometimes two, that we will target, and we will create what we call advocacy action pages for, which basically you enter in your name and address, and you're able to automatically send an email to every member of a committee that's considering a piece of legislation, so that you can easily and quickly make your voice heard on a particular bill. I can't stress enough how important it is to make those phone calls and send those emails. It really does matter. Every single contact we make with our legislators to let them know how we feel is vital in making certain that they understand how people feel about these issues, and the desire of most people in Tennessee to see some common sense gun laws get passed, and to see these numbers, these horrible numbers go down. These numbers of people, women, children, young people that are dying every year in our state. So letting legislators know that you're following this stuff and that you care about it is super important. And then obviously once we get to the point where these bills are on the House floor or are on the Senate floor, then it is really important to contact your particular legislator, let them know that you're a constituent, let them know that you support or oppose a particular bill that they're about to vote on, and let them know that you're going to be watching to see how they vote and hold them accountable.
Mm-hmm. Two questions before we kind of see if there's any callers. Has there ever been a bill proposed at the state or federal level to take away guns from citizens?
No.
Okay.
I mean, the only thing that you could say maybe would be, the red flag laws. I mean, they are being portrayed. There's a false narrative out there that's being put forth by the gun lobby that these are gun confiscation laws. But really what they are they're providing a tool to family members and law enforcement, a mechanism of intervention to try and prevent tragedies. And, red flag laws are about temporary removal of firearms from a person who may be undergoing some type of emotional or psychological crisis. It is not about a permanent confiscation of someone's gun. So, but no, there's never been any kind of federal or state law put in place to just, go around confiscating people.
And no candidate has ever suggested that. Second question, how easily could the Second Amendment be repealed?
That is never going to happen. I can't imagine that ever happening, to be honest. I mean, the Second Amendment is a part of our Constitution, just like the First Amendment is. It was put there by our founding fathers. And, honestly, I don't know that there's really ever been a serious attempt to repeal it. Where I think, we can have discussion is how the Second Amendment is interpreted. And, there are certainly a variety of opinions on how it should be interpreted. The Supreme Court, of course, has weighed in 2008 in the Heller decision, which did create, or codify, I should say, an individual right to keep and bear arms. However, there was language in that Heller decision that did allow states to basically enact certain laws around things like commercial sale of firearms and where guns can be carried. and so forth, what types of guns can be carried. All of that language was included in that Heller decision, which does allow states some latitude in terms of what types of laws they choose to pass, which is why you have some states, for example, like New York or Massachusetts or even California, that have passed, really strong gun laws, and, not for nothing, have also seen the number of people injured and killed with guns in their states go down. But at any rate, I mention all of that just to point out that there is no effort underfoot to repeal the Second Amendment, and I don't think that would ever happen.
Well, and I think that repealing any amendment or any part of the Constitution is not an easy thing.
No, it would require, I'd have to go back.
We'd have to get a government lesson here.
Books from high school, but, it would require, a huge, like a constitutional convention, I would assume. There would have to be a huge, effort put forth across the entire country to do that. And, I don't think that it could ever happen. And, we already have millions of guns in our country. I don't even know how that would look. There would certainly, just logistically, there would never even be any way possible to repeal the Second Amendment and then take everyone's guns away.
Right.
So when you hear people talking about things like that or threatening that that's what what gun control is trying to do, that's a straw man argument. That is creating a scenario that is never going to happen. They create that scenario just to gin up fear and convince people that something as straightforward as just requiring background checks for all gun sales, or trying to create mechanisms for family members or law enforcement to intervene and prevent somebody maybe from using a gun to take their own life or to hurt others. They try and spin those as attempts to take people's guns away and repeal the Second Amendment, and that's just false, and it's done purely to gin up fear and scare people. So reject that when you hear people saying things like that, because it's just false.
Okay, our number here at WCDT is 931, everybody knows that, 967-2201. So if you have a question for Beth, as you can tell, she's very knowledgeable about gun safety and common sense legislation in Tennessee. So we'll go on, and if someone has a specific question, we'll be happy to take that. Something happened at the federal level this week about background checks.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about that?
So H.R. 8, which is the bipartisan bill to expand background checks, passed the full House yesterday. It would extend background checks to all gun sales, including those between private sellers. It is really, I would say it's considered the most significant piece of gun violence prevention legislation to have been passed in 20 years. It is a big deal that it got through the House. However, while there was bipartisan support for the bill, it was still passed largely along party lines. I think the vote was 240 to 190. But there were some Republicans who did vote for it, and there were some Republicans who signed on as co-sponsors. So we are seeing, some Republicans sort of breaking ranks with some of the others in their party to listen to the will of the people. Depending on the poll, between 90 and 97% of Americans support expanding background checks. So that is a step in the right direction. Now, the next step for the background check bill is that it will now be taken up by the Senate. Senator Chris Murphy has the legislation on the Senate side. Unfortunately, it is unlikely that it will pass the Senate, just because the Senate is still controlled by Republicans, and many of them are still controlled by the NRA. And should it pass the Senate, President Trump has already indicated that he would veto it. So all of that is discouraging, but it is still very important to note that getting any gun legislation at all out of Congress Congress is pretty remarkable. For those of us who have been doing this for a while, that just seemed like something that would never happen. And the fact that a lot of the folks who were elected in the midterms were people who ran unapologetically in support of gun safety and gun law reform, and some of them were elected over people who had pledged loyalty to the NRA, is significant. So now we have people in Congress who have made this issue a priority. So that is encouraging. Also happening this week, in fact, I believe the votes will be today, there is another piece of legislation called H.R. 1112, and what that legislation will do is close the Charleston loophole. The Charleston loophole is what allowed a young man who had a felony drug conviction and should have been prohibited from purchasing a weapon. The Charleston loophole allowed him to purchase that gun that he then used to kill 9 members of the Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston. The Charleston loophole basically allows a sale to proceed to a person if details about a particular conviction that may be on their record, if they can't get those records within 3 days, they allow the sale to proceed, which I think most everyone would agree is ridiculous. I mean, that is a gigantic loophole that needs to be closed, and so that will be voted on by the House today, and we hope that will head over to the Senate as well, and that is actually legislation that might have some chance of getting through the Senate, but we'll wait to see. So what I would encourage people to do as it pertains to H.R. 1112, the Charleston loophole bill, I would encourage them to call their particular member of Congress and urge them to vote in favor of H.R. 1112 to close the Charleston loophole. In terms of H.R. 8, the background check bill, I would encourage everyone to contact our state senators, Lamar Alexander, whose phone number is 202-224-4944, and also Marsha Blackburn, whose phone number is 202-224-3344. If I'm being honest, I have absolutely no faith whatsoever that Senator Blackburn will vote the right way on this legislation. I don't know about Alexander. He is in his last term, and every so often he will he'll stand up to the forces within his own party and do things that are contrary. So maybe we can convince him to vote the right way on this bill as he's winding up his career. But at any rate, whether you're talking about the state level or the national level, it's always important to contact your lawmakers and let them know how you feel about this legislation.
Now, Beth, on your website, Save Tennessee Project, do you cover these two bills? Would people be able to get information on them in addition to the state bills?
Yes, if you go on the website, we have a section up at the top that says policy, I think, and underneath that we have federal and state legislation. There's actually quite a few bills at the federal level that are being considered, so we do have some information about each one of them that people can go and read through and see who the bill sponsors are, see if their member of Congress has signed on as a sponsor of some of this legislation. And then, of course, we have all of the state legislation that we track as well. Because we are primarily focused here at the state level, most of our bandwidth is spent following and tracking state legislation, but we do try and keep tabs on what's happening at the federal level. Honestly, we're sort of in uncharted territory because as long as Save Tennessee has been around, there has really been nothing happening at the federal level. So, this is really the first year that we have tracked federal legislation, because it's really the first year that there's been good federal legislation to track. But we do try and just keep people plugged in, and just provide them information if they want more information. They can kind of dig through and learn more about all of the legislation at the federal and state level.
The website, I'll just put another plug in for it, is excellent. It's outstanding. This is a really important issue. It's really hard to keep track of things, and we can read about a shooting or read about legislation, kind of after the fact, and also being on the email list. Can you give that, how to sign up for that too, Beth, your email?
So if you go to the website, there is a button that says Join, and if you click that button, you're taken to like a form that you fill out, and you just give us your name and your address and your email, and you're automatically added to our email list.
Okay.
And I will let you know right now that I am not somebody who believes in sending a ton of emails. Personally, my inbox gets overloaded with emails, so I am very aware of that. So we send out generally about one email a week that just sort of keeps people in the loop with what's happening in terms of tracking legislation. So if you sign up, I'm just letting you know you don't have to worry about being inundated with emails, because honestly I don't even have time to write a whole bunch of emails. So, but if you do sign up, you'll be kept in the loop about what's going on legislatively, and then also periodically we will write a blog post that when there's new data out or new statistics out or new studies out, or when we see certain trends happening in Tennessee. There was a period of time last summer where we had something like 6 murder-suicides in like an 8-week period. It was terrible, so we wrote about that. We just basically try and connect the dots for people across the state when it comes to gun violence happening in Tennessee, because our state is a big rectangle, so things that are happening in East Tennessee, people in West Tennessee may not be aware of, or things that are happening in Nashville, people in East Tennessee may not be aware of, in terms of the amount of domestic violence shootings we see, or mass shootings that we see in the state, or whatever. So we use our website to kind of keep up with all of that, and then we will link people to some of those stories when we send out our weekly email alerts.
And I'm on the email list, and you're exactly right. They come, an alert tells you what the bill is, what's going on, who to call. It's excellent, and it's not overwhelming. There is a donate button that I would encourage people to use as well, but
well, we would appreciate donations. I mean, we're a 501c3. Tax, any donation made to us is tax deductible. I am a terrible fundraiser. There are a lot of things I'm good at. Asking people for money is not one of them. I've got a team of volunteers that are helping me get better at fundraising, and writing grants and trying to obtain some more funding, because it's hard doing this work, and we would like to have at least some part-time paid staff to help us with the work that we're doing. It costs money. We print out information about a particular piece of legislation and distribute it to lawmakers, and just things as simple as ink toner. That's expensive. Taking things and having them printed is expensive. So we definitely can use money. So if anybody feels inclined and wants to donate some money to us, we'd be appreciative. And one thing I have learned from my the folks that are helping me with fundraising is, they point out that a lot of people really care about an issue like gun violence, and they want to do more, but because of their work schedule, or because of whatever reason, they may not be able to volunteer a lot of their time, but they would like to help. And so for some of those people, making a donation is their way of helping. And if somebody feels that way and would like to get involved but doesn't have the time but would like to donate money, we'd be incredibly appreciative for that.
Well, you do incredible work, Beth, and your organization does as well. And I want to thank you so much for talking with us today. I don't want Tennessee to be number one in all these areas, but it looks like we're trying to get there as fast as we can. As you know, and many people know, I'm a nurse practitioner, and my big issue is affordable and accessible health care for all Tennesseans. And I would love to have some 1s and 5s and 7, 11 rankings in health care indices instead of 45, 46, 47.
Yes.
So maybe we can flip. We can trade numbers.
Well, that would be great, because I know that as somebody who studies the healthcare issue, you get frustrated as well, the same way I do with guns, because what you can see is states that have implemented certain policies, they see better outcomes. States, in terms of healthcare, states that have Medicaid expansion and do more to make healthcare affordable to everyone in their state, they see less sick people, and they see less people struggling to figure out how they're going to pay for healthcare, and the outcomes are better. It's not unlike what we see with firearm legislation. States that have gotten very serious about passing evidence-based, common-sense gun law reform, they see significant drops in the number of people injured and killed with firearms, whether it be suicides, whether it be homicides, whether it be, other violence-related, firearm crimes. They see those reductions. So when you can see other states doing the right thing and seeing a positive outcome, and then you see our state continue to be stubborn and go in the other direction, it's maddening. And I know you can relate to what I'm talking about.
Well, I'll stay in the fight if you do.
Yes, I'm in it to win it.
All right, thank you so much. We've had the honor of having Beth Roth from the Safe Tennessee Project talk with us today on gun safety and common sense legislation. Please go to the website, safetennesseeproject.org, and get involved. Thank you, Beth. You have a great day, and I hope you have some good news in the next couple of weeks on some of these pieces of legislation.
That sounds great. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Okay, that's Common Sense Matters for today. If I can just re-announce the announcements. March 9th, we have a meeting with State Chair Mary Mancini at the Coffee County Government Building. That's at 1832 MacArthur Street in Manchester. You can Google that for directions. On March 29th, the Franklin County Democratic Party will have their reorganization meeting beginning at 5:30 with a potluck, and business meeting at 6. We'll be electing officers, identifying delegates, and meeting times and planning for the year. It's at the community room at the Franklin County Annex in Winchester. That's at 839 Dinah Shore Boulevard. On April 6th, again at the Franklin County Annex in the big room, is the Gently Used Treasure sale sponsored by put on by the Franklin County Democratic Women. That's a Saturday, April 6th, from 8 to 2. And if you have things that you'd like to drop off that are gently used, that will be Friday, April 5th from 2 to 8 p.m. We need volunteers for both of these days to make a successful sale. Thank you so much. I'll turn it back to you.
You are listening to WCDT AM 1340.